Everyone, welcome. This is the GTM AI Podcast. Joining me today is the solo founder and CEO of Glitter.io, Yuval Karmi. We dive into the power of AI to enhance workflows and documentation. This is sponsored by the GTM AI Academy, your go-to source for learning how to use AI in companies, teams, and in your individual workflow. Business impact over learning tools. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. This is Coach K, and welcome to another GTM AI podcast. I am very excited to have the man behind Glitter.io, Yuval Karmi. How are you, my friend?
I am doing fantastic. I'm super excited to be here speaking with you today. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Good. Yeah, we randomly connected on LinkedIn. You came and found me and showed me your stuff just because you saw me post about a couple of your competitors, actually. And I'm glad you did because I'm digging your tech, man. So I'm really glad you're able to come on and join us. You're over in Israel at the moment, which is cool. And really excited to have you. So before we jump in, I always like to give, founders and people behind the scenes a chance to describe your story. So what I would love to hear and have you introduce yourself with is, where have you been in the past and what was your journey towards going into AI and launching this craziness you're doing now, which is a good crazy, by the way, but tell me your story.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. So I'll start with this. This is actually my second startup, not my first. First
cool.
one I started when I was 26 years old, and I ended up selling that in 2021. And what I've always been really interested in is like the intersection of education and tech. And I've only recently been able to like pinpoint that and speak about it in this way. But I realize now looking back, it's one of those things where in retrospect, you go, oh yeah, that's always attracted me. But the entrepreneurship bit, I actually have been drawn to since I was like a 4-year-old boy. I always wanted to run and own my own business, and that's why I did my first startup. And now I'm going into this one I've been working on for next to a year almost. So we're live.
That's awesome.
Exciting.
So can I ask, what was the first startup you had before?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first startup I had was called Simpo. It was meant to remind you of the word simple. And what we did was basically onboarding guides for inside software. So if you're a user, you entered the software, you would see these bubbles pop up. They're everywhere, but people used to build with programmers at the company, and we created like a visual tool to create them. So I ended up selling that to our biggest competitor, WalkMe, in 2021. And then I went to travel in South America for almost 3 years and cleared my head, 2 years more like it, and now I'm back.
Nice. I was going to say, it sounds like WalkMe, but now you sold it. Makes sense. So that's awesome. Well, good for you. Now you have Glitter.io. So now I got to hear the story. Why did you call it Glitter? Because we have Scribe, there's Guide, which I've posted about on LinkedIn. Now you have Glitter. Tell me the story behind the name.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was building the company, it was between two approaches generally. I'm really happy you asked me that question. One was like the very obvious approach of just a descriptive name that told you what it did. So I think God picked that approach, and that's perfectly fine for them. They actually picked a really nice name. I was thinking of Guide Maker or something. And then the other approach, and I looked at that, I was like, God, this is boring. I don't want to put my name to a company that just bores me when I think of the name. And the other one was just something fun and completely unrelated. And I ended up going with Glitter AI. Now the domain is glitter.io. I couldn't get the AI one. They wanted like hundreds of thousands of dollars for it.
Right.
But the reason I picked it is because I thought it would be fun. And like when people think of work, they take a very serious approach to it. And I figured this would be really nice to do something that would not do that. And then I added AI there. So like to make it clear, it's not like the stuff that sticks to you and you can't get off, glitter.
Right.
Yeah, it's a work tool.
I love it. So it's nice too, because it gives you flexibility to where when you want to flex your muscles, whatever tech comes out in the future, you can, expand instead of being restricted to a certain flow of things, which is cool. So for those who have not seen this or don't know what this is, tell me more about the tech. What do you do? Give me the pitch. I know you have the pitch. What's your pitch behind the tool?
I'm really happy to give it to you. So Glitter AI is a tool that takes any process you do on the computer and it turns it into a step-by-step guide, complete with screenshots and text. And the way it works is basically, instead of jumping on a Zoom with someone, you open the app, you speak out loud, like you say what you're doing out loud. It works in 56 languages. And then you click, every click becomes a screenshot. And what you say gets transcribed, translated to English, and becomes a written guide to accompany all those screenshots. And the intention is to basically save you the time from jumping on those Zooms. So you can support your customers or your colleagues or your mom if you want to. So that's the high level idea behind it. And it's a real time saver. And there's a story actually behind why that spoke to me so much. I don't know if you want me to go into it or not.
Please. Yeah, please. I'd love to hear it.
Sure. So historically, I'm like a terrible manager. Unfortunately, I think I've grown over
Good to
time,
know.
but I've become better. But like historically, I'm a perfectionist by nature. And so the hardest thing that I had a hard time with at Simpo, at my first startup, was delegating because I wanted everything done right. And I learned over time that the idea of doing everything yourself to do it right is like a really bad idea. So you do want to create documentation and then pass it on to other people, and then they can follow whatever process you need to follow. But creating documentation takes a really long time. It's a time-consuming process. And I wanted to, when I was thinking of along the lines of Glitter AI, I was like, what if you could do this in like the time that it took you to explain it to someone? And that's where the idea was born. But it comes from the pain of just feeling like overwhelmed and being a type A
Yeah.
personality. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally does. So right now, if I can ask, do you have a team working with you, like contractors, just yourself, or tell me more about the back end?
Yeah, so there's one contractor that I'm working with for the engineering bit, but I actually coded most of this myself. I've been coding since I was
Nice.
8 years old. And I have a couple of friends of mine who are helping me with the go-to-market, with a marketing bit, both on a strategy, from a strategy standpoint, as well as the actual performance marketing and like
Yeah.
setting up all the systems.
Yes.
But the reason, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, just I will ask the question because you you say you're a terrible manager, which I'm assuming you're probably better than you think you are. But let's just say you are a terrible
I hope
manager.
so.
This is probably a tool you use yourself because as another startup, trying to get stuff done, this is probably something I'm assuming you use as part of your tech stack of yourself, just describing things. Is that correct?
Totally dog
Yeah.
food this. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna ask you a couple questions, and it's not to put you on the spot, but hopefully make sure people understand the differences between you and others. So, for example, I use Loom all the time, mostly for
Mhm.
video recording and other stuff, and all the things that Loom could do. And then, you saw me post about Scribe and Guide. So, Scribe and Guide are definitely different tools, and then yours is like it but different. I'd love to have you dive into what makes yours unique, different than the other, two, three options. Why would you use yours versus the others?
For sure. So first of all, I want to give a really big shout out to the tools that are out there already. Loom has been an inspiration to me, and I've actually used their tool for a while. I'll touch on them first
Okay.
because the most obvious thing that you can think of is, oh, okay, I'll just record a video. Like it's the same thing,
Yeah.
it takes you the amount of time you would think that it would to explain it to someone else, and then you have it documented. It
Right.
turns out for the SOP use case, for the here's a process that you need to follow use case, Glitter AI, in my opinion, is a way better tool for that use case than Loom. And I'll explain why. First of all, when I actually watch people recording videos on Loom or what have you, they usually do it like 4 or 5 times before they get it right because they know that they're going to be like on the spot on their being watched later. And so they repeat themselves all the time. And then the other thing I would say about that is that when something updates, it's really hard to update a video, right? Like
Mhm.
after the fact, you need to then go in and re-record it. And then when people follow a process, I actually watch people follow videos and they pause, switch tabs, resume, pause. So it's like
Mhm.
it's not a good like outcome for them, for the people watching it.
Right.
That's a Loom front. What I will say versus my existing competition in the market that's similar, more similar to what I do is the biggest differentiator here is the ability to actually speak as you're carrying out the process. Because when you explain something to someone, the context is there and you don't necessarily remember everything that you said and did and explained after the fact. And the way that existing tools in the market work is you click to create the screenshots, but then afterwards you go and you add in the context, either manually or with AI or what have you. But here you're
Yeah.
just doing this and it knows how to break everything down and give you a full guide. Does that make sense?
It totally does. Yeah, for me, like doing the academy, there's a bunch of videos in there that I've had to redo 3 or 4 times because AI is changing all the time. So it makes my life
Mhm.
wonderfully awesome because I have to update all the time. But as an example would be, so someone gets a new tool, they update something, 2 months later something changes. Is it more of a fact of re-recording the entire flow or just re-recording a section? Or tell me more, because selfishly I'm asking about how do you
Yeah.
update something using the tool?
So after you record it, after you like
Yes.
capture the guide, you end up with an interface that looks eerily similar to Google Docs. And
Mm.
you literally just do that. Like you click edit, make
Eerily
something to a
similar.
link, eerily similar.
Yeah.
No, not
Good.
alluding to anything. It definitely
Yeah.
looked at Google Docs when I was building
Yeah.
this. And then you can replace screenshots. You can like re-record just a section of it if you need to, if something updated. You can edit the actual image for that particular thing. You can blur out
Yeah.
sensitive information if you accidentally
Yeah.
recorded customer information. All of that is different than how you would record like a video, for instance.
So in the enablement space, I have been in revenue enablement now for 10, 12 years. And a huge part of what we do is documentation because I go into startups
and they don't have any documentation for pretty much everything. And one of my biggest job is to make it so the content is not only recorded, but then also accessible and understandable across
Mhm.
the entire customer facing team, which is actually really challenging because you have all these questions that come up as a result of it, you know? And after using your tool, I kept thinking, like, where the heck was this thing for the last 10 freaking years? Because I have personally felt the pain of having to make these. Like, I had to screenshot, then type everything in and screenshot again. It's like I manually had to do it all because we didn't have any tools, you know? So
Yeah.
from my viewpoint, the time saves and the streamline behind some of the stuff to enable other people who might be using that content 3 months later at some other location remotely is, for me, it's so nice because I'm the one who has to create it all. And what's
Yeah.
funny is after going through several startups, and this is more for the audience out there just as an FYI, one of the things that separates people from a good valuation to a great evaluation is documented processes and
Mhm.
being able to have clear understanding of all the things. Because otherwise, if it's just chaos lives in your head, like it's hard to formalize and strategize and to improve anything that you don't have actually created. Does that make sense? So for me,
Yeah.
your tool, even though it may seem, I don't want to say inconsequential, may not seem like a big deal. Like to me, it's a big deal because it's documenting all of the things that usually take hours and hours and hours to do really quick, you know? So anyways, what I would love to do with that as context is with anyone you've worked with, have you seen, like I told you before, what about business impact over just cool, fancy
Mhm.
tools? What do you feel like is the impact of your tool? And do you have any stories of customers you're like, this happened and that was awesome and something that you could share?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I'll start with this is a pretty new tool, right? Like it just
Just
went
barely
live.
went out. Yeah.
Yeah, like on Wednesday, I think, to much fanfare, actually got product of the day. I'm super excited about that.
Congrats, man. That's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. But what I've been doing over the past few days is I've been answering customers who have been messaging me and telling me this is amazing because, and so I have a bunch of those stories that I'm happy to share with you. But your
Please.
original question was like the impact of this. So I will say two main things. One is if you were going to create documentation already, maybe you have someone in your company that is responsible for that and you were going to create it, now you save them a ton of time. They go from hours to create, an SOP or some documentation for a process or a new product release or feature or whatever to minutes, right? That's great. That's time savings 100% as a productivity thing. What
Mhm.
I will say, however, speaking much more to what you were saying earlier, is in most cases, if you're a startup, you just wouldn't have these processes in the first place because they just take forever to do. And the idea that now I could be like, click done. Now it's documented. I can give it to someone where I just wouldn't have it in the first place because there's a barrier to entry there. I think that is extraordinarily valuable. The time savings, you can do an ROI calculation on the salary of that person or whatnot.
Right.
Great. But the fact that you have that in the first place, I think that is a force multiplier for growth.
Yeah, I think funny enough in sales, when I went in and told people about, because I've been in the SaaS tech world for a while, and anytime I tell people about time savings, I'm like, time savings is great, but it's a very operational cost savings,
Yeah.
which is inconsequential to, it's not that it's not a big deal. It is for me personally, but for the business as a whole, especially when you're doing millions of dollars a year in revenue, like it's whatever. When you get to the more tactical or strategic things, of like, how does this impact the team and workflow of the team? Or how does this actually affect the value of the company? That's a way different conversation. Because when you come down to it, like in the academy, the things I look at is when you take people and you mix it with process, that gives you results. And
Yeah.
so the people can only do what is clearly communicated in the process. If the process is not clear, they're not going to do it well, which means it could break or slow down the results. So it may seem like again, a small thing of, yeah, you can record the process and there you go. It took me 2 minutes, but the value behind it, I think, is what is powerful. So I'd love to hear from you because you're the, brain behind this. What's the value of documenting process?
When you're going to go ahead and scale, and if you're so let me just tell you the story that I was experiencing and the one
Please.
that I've been hearing from customers. I'm a type A personality, right? Like a little bit anal. I want things done right.
Horrible
Perfectionist.
manager. Yeah, I got it.
I alluded to that already.
Yeah.
So I might tend to do everything myself, or many processes myself. You cannot scale yourself beyond a certain point, right? You can do that up to a point, and past that point, you need to bring either other people or AI, if you'd like, to actually
Yeah.
multiply your ability to do what you're doing and grow. if you have to jump on a Zoom call with someone or just sit there and train them, that's what I used to do with my employees in person. This is pre-COVID times. Sit next to them and train them and show them how to do stuff. And then they forget. And then they have questions. And then that's a blocker. If you have to do that, you're just going to grow a lot slower. And so having these processes documented, where it's also very cheap to recreate them or change them when processes change, as they do often in startups, is extraordinarily valuable for growth. Not talking about the time savings bit. And then there are some softer things that are actually very emotional, and I think would maybe speak to some of the audience that would be that might relate to my thing, to like how I felt.
Please tell me.
I know I seem quite personable, but I actually have a little bit of social anxiety. Every time I would have to jump on a call with someone, my heart would start racing a bit. And it goes the same for recording a video, because I'm live doing something and it drains me of energy. I love doing it, but it drains me of energy. And so the ability to then I had a customer reach out and go, listen, I'm like I have ADHD and I'm neurodivergent and I have a hard time like doing these things live with people. This allows me to do it offline and not have that sense that it doesn't drain me of energy. So that's just on the human, from a human standpoint, makes people feel much better that they're able to do that without having to jump on an interface with someone, so they can save their energy for the things that really matter, where they need to interface with someone.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. Like I am a little bit opposite of you. I'm an ex-musician, lead singer. Like I love getting in front of people. Like I'm a different beast in whole. But however, weirdly enough, I have major social anxiety as well. So I understand the whole. I know it sounds weird, like I'm a weird beast, but I understand the feeling behind having anxiety around the one-on-one conversation on different things because of all the stuff that comes up with it, you know? So totally understand and totally get it. And I appreciate you being willing to point that out because it's a real deal and it can affect people. Transitioning just a bit, you and I were alluding to some of your own workflows. And one reason why I asked about your team was because I wanted to ask this question, which is obviously you have your tool, but I'd love to know, what do you do as a startup trying to get things going? What is either your own tech stack or your own workflows with AI? Like, how are you leveraging it to scale up your own company?
Yeah, super happy to speak to that. I'll go way back to, I think, was it like late November of 2022 or 3 when ChatGPT came out, and
22.
did a big splash. It was 22. And I remember looking at it and I sent a message in my family group and I was like, listen, this is going to be like the biggest deal in tech since, probably the transistor or something. Like, it's insane. It's such a multiplier. So the reason I bring it up is obviously ChatGPT is really huge. In my product itself, my product integrates, Glitter AI integrates with OpenAI behind the scenes, both to do the transcription bit as well as write the article out for you. And then what I started hacking together for my own process, because I'm like a one-man show right now, sort of, like a couple of friends helping me and a contractor, but a very small team. How do you answer hundreds of customer questions and conversations that come up and feature requests and things like that? And what I started doing is I started forwarding that via make.com. I have a little workflow that takes
automation. Love it.
Intercom conversation and it puts it in like a Notion doc. So I can prioritize all of those things. There are impacts on marketing as well. Like, how do you write out marketing pages in a way that speaks to a particular market segment or audience that I'm starting to do now. But ask me more specifically, and I'm happy to dig into really anything that would be interesting for the folks listening.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I love you brought up Make, just because Zapier, Make, I use a couple of the tools that are more enterprise-based, like Momentum. But the automation piece with AI is like where I think it takes it to the whole other level. So I'd love to hear you talk more about any type of automation you're using with AI, like what you just talked about, because I think that's the thing that I haven't dove into a lot. So I'd love to hear more about the automations you've set up and how it helps you.
Sure. So I end up getting inundated by a bunch of requests on a bunch of different channels for things that people are asking about, questions, feedback, feature requests, etc. And it's in my head, and I'm having a hard time keeping everything together. And this might help the managers in the room, maybe even those suffering from ADHD, maybe just busy managers in general.
Maybe just busy, yeah.
The automation that I had set up was one that allows me to send a WhatsApp message, like a voice memo, that gets transcribed, goes through a ChatGPT prompt that tells it, extract the person who asked from the voice message. If they're there, extract the person and the whatever identifier of the person that suggested something. I can also screenshot like a WhatsApp message that I got from someone asking for something, or an intercom conversation, transcribe that and put that in a Notion doc. And now I can like capture and follow everything that's happening. Even if I'm like, I was walking on the beach yesterday. I live in Tel Aviv, so we have a beach here. And I was like, oh wait, another person asked me that thing. I don't have to go and write it down. I sent the WhatsApp voice memo that goes to make, that's in the Notion doc now. And so it's really easy to organize. Just as a quick example, I don't know if that's what you're going for, but this is
No, I love
what
it.
I'm set up.
Yeah, I think especially now with like just this last, has it been a week? 8 days ago was when 4.0 came out and it has all this vision capability, like the craziness of what you can do now. It's just absolutely, we're just barely getting started, and the craziness of it just still blows my mind. But like having a, like in theory, you could take a screenshot of some conversation, sit it on the chat GPT, you could transcribe it, send it on to somewhere else. It's just what you could do with it is just crazy in a good way. It's just phenomenal. And I'm glad you actually brought up the whole OpenAI thing. So I was going to ask you like what tool you use in the back end, if you use your own tech, or if you use OpenAI. Where, as far as your own tech, what are you excited for? What's coming next for you? And what are you seeing? And I'm going to say 6 months to a year, which is like light years in AI time. But
No,
in the next, and let's just say until the end of the year, what are you excited about coming up?
I think there's actually a particular feature that I got a ton of requests to develop, and I would love to do that with the new 4.0 capabilities of OpenAI. And that is the ability to take like an existing process that you've already recorded, maybe you have a video of it, maybe it was a recording of a Zoom call, and completely automatically break that down into all the segments that were talked about with the screenshot or the capture of the frame from the Zoom call that you were in, and
Oh, I
make
love it.
that into a written guide. Because right now, to implement something like that, you would have to have the user manually like capturing every frame that they want to
Right.
become. And so that's a hyper specific feature that I'd like to develop, but I think it'd be extraordinarily valuable if you have a guide library of like 400 videos or something. I have a customer who has that,
Totally.
and just like funnel that through that and then pass it through OpenAI, put that in my UI, and then that enables the sharing and export and embedding capabilities of the guides. That would be super great. That's on like on the product front, what I'm thinking about. Does that answer your
Right.
question?
Totally does. And from someone who has a library of myself in the past, I'm like, yes, please do that, because that would be so nice. Because like you have either Looms, you have the Zoom recordings, because there's so many. Let me give an example. Like when I get a new tech for my sales team and I have however many people, 100 salespeople I got to get onboarded to a particular tool, the classic thing that happens is we get all the stuff set up in the background. We'll say something like Sales Loft or something, which I love the team, but let's just say classic what happens. Then they come in, they do a 2 or 3 times training. They show everyone live what to do, how to click it, make sure you're sitting upright, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, man, this would be so much nicer. We had some sort of documentation beforehand to do this stuff, because we're spending all this time live doing the stuff that we shouldn't be doing live. Does that make sense? But because we didn't have any other option of doing it. So having what you're talking about, just the setup guides for just flows, tools, whatever, it would be so nice. Or to take the recordings they do for you, which is nice, and then flop it in and get your stuff output, would be awesome. Let's talk more generally speaking about AI. So you've been obviously startup, you're now going into it now, talking to both, users to bigger companies. What are you excited about as a whole? When you look at like where OpenAI is going, what Google released this last week, like all the stuff's going, what do you see coming that businesses in general should be aware of, or that you personally want to tap into?
I think there is the complete and utter breakdown of silos, thankfully, that's going
Yeah.
to happen. One of the things that I noticed, even at Simpo, my previous startup, was a relatively small company. We were 21 people at our peak, right? Not giant. And even there, we had different teams that were aware of different things and different tooling. Like I think it's some insane amounts, dozens of tools, maybe over 100 that any given SaaS company nowadays uses just to run their operations. Intercom, Zendesk, and HubSpot and Salesforce, you name it, right? Like a million tools. And then different teams have different tools. And what I'm most excited to see is everything going into something like a data warehouse or something, and then being able to query over that and ask questions that lead to the breakdown of silos. So it's not like the marketing team is aware of one thing, sales is aware of another, and then customers are requesting a third thing, but that didn't get documented, and therefore it doesn't exist in the system. That's one thing. And then that's the beginning of another phase that I think we're going to see, which is the breakdown of interfaces. I don't think we're going to have as many tools to log into anymore. I think we're going to have a unified AI interface. And I think Satya Nadella talked about it, and Sam Altman talked about it, where you will no longer have apps like on your phone or in the computer as much. You would be able to just make a request. It will go and figure out where to do what you need to do and come back to you with the answer. And I think that's amazing. Full stop, actually. That's where I'll end.
Well, stop. No, we're gonna say you're gonna say something. What you think is amazing, and well, come on, keep going. What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say, and not only that, but you get the human integrate, like to integrate the humanity, our humanity into it a lot more, because a lot of this data right now, you could do a lot of what I just talked about right now, right? You could go through, run through like an embedding model, come back, figure out how to search all your data everywhere. Companies are doing that. But what you're missing is things like tone of voice and emphasis that up until 4.0 for ChatGPT, that just wasn't taken into account. When you made a request, your voice was transcribed to text and lost a ton of data.
Right,
It's
right.
the classic examples, let's eat grandma or let's eat grandma. It's two different things. No longer that is the case. If you have a question now, the ability to understand tone of voice and whether something maybe something is urgent. You make a request and therefore the AI figures out it needs to bring you the most recent things, or the customer is most likely to churn or something like that. That's cool to me. I find that fascinating. We're just at the beginning stages of this.
Yeah, coming from someone who I've been testing out AI with sales call transcripts, like trying to figure out and what you can get out of just the text alone is awesome. But again, you're missing all the inflection and emotion of someone's voice, which is, as we know from body language and from voice training, is 90% of the conversation, not just the text, So being able to capture that, I think, is super powerful. I'm really excited to see where it goes from there. But to your point, I always compare this to people because it's the best thing I have to compare it to is just Iron Man and Jarvis, just thinking about people are always worried about, is AI going to take my job? I'm like, no, because Iron Man, yes, did build an Iron Man suit by himself in a cave, whatever, but he took it to a whole nother level with an AI assistant, It just augmented his own smarts. And so what you're talking about, having an AI that knows the background of apps and stuff. So you say, hey, make me a reservation for this place at this thing with this whatever, and get me an Uber to get there, it just takes care of it for you, is a whole world that, for me, like you talked about the brain space you have before, it is when you take out all the busy work brain space and now you have all this new time and energy to focus on creative stuff. Like I'm actually really excited about where we can go because it frees us up to be more human, as weird as that sounds,
100%.
So
Are you familiar with the concept of the second brain? Have you heard of that?
Yes, I want to make sure I'm thinking the same thing you are, but tell me.
So I vaguely know of it, right? So I might be talking out my ass, but
No, it's okay.
To the listeners, please go and
Yeah.
do your own research. But my understanding is that there's a whole trend over the past few years, actually, but now it's been accelerated greatly, of people who have the concept of a second brain where they don't have to remember all these things. They have everything documented and written out, and they can query that, like whether it's simple stuff like when is my friend's birthday, or what's that thing that I read a week ago or a month ago that had to do with that other thing that I don't really remember the name of, but they describe it and that's able to pull it up for you. So you no longer have to rely on your own memory. I think that frees up your brain from a lot of fatigue so that you can focus on things that are a lot more human. Like I think the enabling of allowing humans to just be a lot more human and not have to worry about minutia or detail and take up brain space for that is amazing. Yeah, I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I do too. And there's tools like yours, honestly, that make that possible. So if you're able to take out the stuff that would have, like before, I know very personally the pain of how long it took me before to do a process and screenshot and type it out and all this other stuff. It's a pain. So having tools like this to be able to get done faster so I can focus on the things that AI, at least so far, cannot do for me, which is a different conversation of what scary and cool things that could be. It's just nice to have that so I can take more time to be more of me versus busy work stuff, So yeah. Well, last thing you have, obviously, for people to find you is glitter.io. I grabbed your demo off of YouTube and I threw it into the demo tools library, just FYI. And I'd love to hear more about what are you really looking forward to yourself personally with AI? What are you looking forward to that's next that you are like, I can't wait for this to happen?
So I shared earlier that, I struggle with keeping everything that's going on from a million different channels together, not just in work. My closest friends know this about me, where if they send me a message, like a text message or WhatsApp or whatever, WhatsApp is more common in this part of the world, but whatever. The chances of me responding to them are very binary. Like it's either going to happen immediately and then they get a response, Or a month later, they're gonna get or maybe a week later, they get a text back going, I am so sorry. I'm just now seeing this. I'm not just now seeing this. I saw it when they sent it. I was just overwhelmed. I couldn't respond. The idea of having something to help me organize all of that stuff and get back to the people that are who are most important to me quickly would be amazing. So I don't have to keep on doing this explanation thing of, listen, I just get overwhelmed easily. Having AI helping me that would be absolutely fantastic. That would be a huge relief.
Again, using AI to help you be more human, which is nice.
It's the same concept, right?
I get it, man. I'm the same way, so I totally understand the pain. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you? Just through the website on LinkedIn? What do you prefer?
They can shoot me an email directly, or they can find me on LinkedIn. My name is just not a super common name. I'll just give my email because that's easier to remember.
Sure,
so it's
sure.
Yuval, Yuval at glitter, like the stuff that sticks to you and doesn't come off, .io. Yuval at glitter.io. Shoot me an email. I respond to literally everything myself. I would be delighted to hear from people, really.
Awesome. I'm a fan of the tech. I appreciate the time you jumping in and give us kind of the background of what you have going on. Also, your own AI workflow, which I love. And nothing but success and luck to you, my man.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure speaking with you.
Cool. Thank you, man. And everyone else, we'll catch you on the flip. See ya.
Thanks for listening to the GTM AI Podcast. Please follow, subscribe, like, comment, and come back for more.